You're listening to Cowley's Instructor Podcast, where the learning never stops. Welcome and thank you for listening to Cowley's Instructor Podcast. I hope you enjoyed last week's episodes, and I'm so grateful for all the feedback that I got. So maybe after today's episode again, please send me a message or comment on the Facebook post and let me know how you found the episode. So I'm so grateful for all of you guys for listening and supporting the podcast, and I really hope that you're getting some education out of it as well as entertainment. So please subscribe and rate the podcast as well, as this will help others find the podcast and help the podcast grow and allow me to do even more with the podcast. So on to today's episode. Today we're joined by a top trainer, Stewart. We talk about his coaching course at Bright Coaching, and we dig into that a little bit as I was genuinely intrigued about this course. We also talk about his new connection with the honest truth and how he's bringing that into his course. We then move on and we talk about one of the competencies which we'll be doing throughout the season. And this competency we're going to be talking about: was the agreed lesson structure appropriate for the pupil's experience and ability? We then move on, and this is the first episode that we're going to be talking about the national standards for driver and rider training. So we hit the first two elements on that, which was confirm that you comply with legal requirements and confirm that your training vehicle is fit for purpose. So we have a conversation about what is meant by that and what may be some of the pitfalls that instructors fall into. Don't forget to hang around till the end of the show for Stuart's top tip. So with nothing else left to say, enjoy the show. So today I'm joined by Stewart Lockery, and Stewart is someone who feels like you burst onto the scene, but I feel like it's probably a little bit like when you see those images of an iceberg, where there's all this stuff underneath, and then we just get to see the little peak, and it might just be because of the circles I like go in, but from my perspective, it feels like you jumped onto the scene and have started putting yourself out there, and what you're putting out is amazing, and so that got everyone's attention. But my guess is there's a hell of a lot of work that went on before we noticed. So yeah, welcome, sir.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate it. I think that's a fair comment. I kind of feel like I think I have a reasonable profile in Scotland. Certainly Glasgow, Edinburgh, Perth, Inverness. These are places that I go to and do training courses, and I've been through my work with the ADI NGC, which I'll talk about in a minute. I get to know various associations, Aberdeen, so I feel like I'm kind of known up here. I'm not the kind of person that's overly active on Facebook groups. I'm not the kind of person that will contribute to discussions around that kind of thing. So I think it's probably a geographical thing, but I've not really put myself forward as, trying to be nationwide or anything like that. Not until very recently. That's not been one of my aims. But it's good to be described as busting onto the scene with some interesting stuff. I'll take that every day of the week, Phil. Thanks.
Fair enough. And yeah, so I think I remember the first time I met you actually was at the Kempton conference, and yes, you were introducing me onto the stage with Lou Walsh, who had dragged me onto the stage at the last minute. And from that point, we sort of met, we had a little chat, and then from that point, obviously, I saw you sort of started to put out some more content and starting up this new course that you're offering. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can do. I guess just probably it might help to do a little bit of background when I say, like, what I've been doing for the past kind of 16 years. I've been an ADI and a trainer for 16 years. I own a driving school, which is based in Glasgow. That's Caledonian driver training. We have around 25 instructors at the moment. We have about another 15 PDIs going through. We've usually got about 14 or 15 PDIs a year going through. So the driving school is good. I'm really pleased with where that's got to. I wanted to write a qualification for driving instructors ever since I got involved with Tri Coaching Partnership. I was one of the first guys to go through the BTEC level 4. I got into that at the time where I was getting involved in instructor training, 2010, around about that time, 2011, kind of. And the BTEC 4 just kind of blew my mind a little bit, as it blew the mind of many people up and down the country. It was a real kind of game changer for me, and changed the way I think, changed the way I think about my career, changed the way I think about my personal life, and all that good stuff. I became a trainer. I delivered the BTEC level 4 with Ian Lavelle, who's an audit trainer down in Dumfries. We had a great time. It was so much fun. It was so much fun. Such a good laugh. We did courses in Livingston, Dumfries, Edinburgh. I think we did one in Glasgow as well. And then COVID hit. So 2019, 2020, and that's when I started thinking about, I'd like to do this myself. I was getting a little bored delivering the same content. I was thinking maybe there's stuff out there that's more up to date, because the qualification was getting a little bit dated by that point. 2009, I think it was written. So I started thinking about that, and I started considering how I would put together a qualification that was as good as what Tri Coaching had created. But I didn't want it to be the same. I wanted it to be different. I wanted it to be built on more up-to-date academic research than the BTEC 4 was written on. It was obviously going to be built on the same foundations of client-centered learning and coaching, and theories of behavioral change in terms of planned behavior and all that kind of stuff, because these things are, well, they don't belong to Tri Coaching. These things are open source that are out there. But I'm a really strong believer in the fact that we should be looking outside of the DVSA if we want to improve. And that's not to disregard things that we're going to talk about today, like the driver training standard, the national standard, or the ADI. But I think that if we want to make long-term changes to road safety and improve it and reduce road deaths and create more individuals, young people who are more self-aware, then we need to be a little bit more ambitious. And that's where I see my role for the next 5-10 years. Hence Tri Coaching. I had no idea that Tri Coaching was going to collapse. When it did, I cleared my desk and I focused on finishing what I'd started. So that's been a really tough process over the last, what's that now, 6 months, 7 months. But a lot of people think I've written this course to replace Tri Coaching, but that wasn't the case. It was always the idea that there would be 2 accredited qualifications on the market. If you'd done the BTEC 4, you could come and do mine, and you would not be wasting your money. You could choose between the 2, or ideally people would do both, because there's plenty of stuff there for instructors to learn.
Yeah, that's I'm intrigued by that, and it's nice to sort of kind of hear the background behind that. I didn't think you'd done it to replace Tri Coaching, but I obviously saw there was a similarity in that sort of sense, partly because I knew that it wouldn't be possible to have written it that quickly. So
exactly, yeah,
yeah,
I'm absolutely knackered as it is with what I've done. It's been hard work.
No, absolutely. So the talk, like, maybe because I've done I did the Tri Coaching, the BTEC, and a great course, and it's a shame it's not out there. So I wonder if you could just like clarify some of the, and I know obviously I don't necessarily want to give out your content from your course, but what are some of the differences then? So if I came to do your course having done the BTEC, and because my guess is that you may find that a lot of the people that come to do that course are the type of people that would have done, that are looking for that extra level of training. What am I getting that's going to take me above and beyond?
So yeah, good question. Obviously we have to build on the same principles of coaching and client-centered learning which are there. One of the challenges with the qualification is pitching it at both levels. So levels of people like yourself, kind of the well-known trainers who I would obviously like to come and do this qualification, and people who are perhaps new to the industry, whose training, for whatever reason, has not really touched on client-centered learning and coaching, because we know that there is training out there that doesn't really do that. It's still very much core competency focused, and just maybe a little kind of sprinkling of coaching somewhere to get some points on the marking sheet, unfortunately. So there will be pre-work. This is not answering the question, but I'll come back to it in a second. This is just to reassure people who don't know as much as you that there is a lot of pre-work involved in this qualification in terms of webinar content that people can watch, which will obviously not be as much as a BTEC for, but it will give them the basic foundations of what that BTEC contained. It will point them to resources. It will signpost them to books and other places that they can look to get that general foundational knowledge, I guess. That's not difficult to find now. That's one of the great things that the BTEC did. Just so many things opened up. One of the examples I love to use, and I know you did this in your book club with Terry's podcast, the Jed and Claire's book on client-centered learning and driver training. So that's a tremendous place to start for anyone who's not done any kind of qualifications, who has not been exposed to coaching client-centered learning through the Part 3 training. So we'll be pointing people to resources like that. If you've done the BTEC level 4 and you're more advanced as an instructor, more advanced as a trainer, then what we've done is we've built in some more advanced coaching concepts. So a lot of this, some of the stuff Bob Morton does talk about, we've got things around contracting, which is a really kind of, I would love to see that brought into our industry in the same way that the GROW model was brought into this industry. My work, the thing that I enjoy doing, and something I really wanted to build into, was a more personalized experience for learner drivers, though, and young people. And for me, that's about talking about people's values and identity. So I'm very big on people's identity as instructor. First of all, what kind of driving instructor do you want to be in terms of your development? But I think there are also places in our driver training where we can link up with the higher levels of the GDA matrix around identity of young people, especially with things like peer groups and all that kind of stuff. So there are coaching models that lend themselves very well to this kind of this kind of thing. So what I've tried to do is look at the models that are out there from like executive coaching, for example, and bring those in, and then try and match them up to situations in where we can give pupils pre-work, I guess, again, or work in between lessons. So we want pupils to go, we talk among ourselves, and we're doing these kind of podcasts and things about encouraging pupils to take responsibility in between lessons. Quite often we just focus on a little bit of reflection and then it's topics in research. At least we do it at Caledonia. It's very much go and research the topic. So this week we're going to do roundabouts. Go away and look up roundabouts, come back and tell me what the key things about roundabouts are. Do the briefing for me. Come and teach me how to do roundabouts, that kind of thing, which is brilliant. I love all that kind of stuff. I would like to see us getting young people to do some, deeper thinking around the higher levels of the GDE in between lessons. So if we can create tools that we can give to driving instructors, that driving instructors can implement into their lessons that help young people with that would be fantastic. And there's no better example of an organization that does that kind of thing than The Honest Truth. The Honest Truth has created resources that are really simple, really professional, really quick, that don't intrude on your driving lessons, that do things that driving instructors don't normally do. It's higher level GDE, it's responsibility, it's peer pressure, it's alcohol and drugs, and all that kind of thing. which kind of segues quite nicely into our kind of partnership with The Honest Truth. So I guess I might go on and talk about it, unless you've got any questions on the first part, Phil.
No. Oh, actually, yeah, I will actually. I'll pause you for a
Yeah.
second, say, because because I love the honest truth stuff, and I don't want to necessarily sort of kind of rush that. And actually, our school, my school, have all of my instructors have the honest truth app, and we use that, and I have a little theme of the week, so that we have a truth of the week, and we all sort of teach the same truth each week, and it's so good, it's so good, and like you
Yeah.
said, it creates these conversations that you don't have. And before I ask my question, I just have this like little story that I have, that because I'm teaching my daughter to drive at the moment, and we watched the seatbelt question, and she watched the video, and then I said to her, "Is there anybody in your life that you would be worried about not wearing a seatbelt in the car?" And she said, "Granddad." And I was like, "Well, my dad?" And she said, "Yeah, granddad." And I was like, "Really?" And so now I've had to go and show the video to my dad, because I didn't realize he was doing his little deliveries that he does while not wearing his seatbelt, and just keeping out in the car with him. So yeah, we had a bit of learning there.
Amazing, amazing. That's good.
But we went through a conversation as well as of like, okay, so how would you deal with that then when someone gets in your car? And I think that's really important when you talk about these things, is not just to talk about the risks and who might do this, but actually create solutions so that when they come up in real life, they have a little, so it might be slightly different, but at least they have an idea of how they're going to handle that situation. So what I was, and this is more, I was going to ask you, and this is actually probably more just for my curiosity because I'm intrigued about the course. How's it structured? Because I know the BTEC was structured quite different to how any other courses are really structured over that long period of time. So how's it structured then?
The same way as the BTEC.
Okay.
I've taken that model. I've taken that model and used it as my framework. So four modules in classroom. So it takes place in Glasgow. The first one is on the 4th of March 2024. You do module 1 and you are issued with assignments based on the content that you've just learned, and you can go away and do your assignments and submit them at any time. Similar to the BTEC, if don't let the assignments put you off, because there is full support available from Right Coaching. We're accredited by the SQA. So part of that means that we've gone through a 6-month process to get accredited, to put policies in place to show that we are supporting our learners no matter their academic level, no matter any kind of, other difficulties they have in learning, accessibility and all this kind of stuff. And then module 2 is 3 months later. So the modules are 3 months apart, which means it takes you 9 months to get through 4 modules, and you can submit your assignments at any time. We have internal verifiers, internal assessors, and then we're also externally verified, and they do the way that it works when you're accredited is the accrediting body, SQA, comes along twice a year, and they pick a sample of assignments at random, and we have to show them to show that they're all being marked legitimately and correctly, and consistently, to show that across the board. In terms of yeah, I mean, I think that answers the question. It's broadly similar to the BTEC level 4 because that model worked.
So it's interesting, and because it's something I found when like doing a course like that where you're spreading it over, that quite often you can go on a workshop and get all of this information like in one day, and then it's really hard to kind of like put all that into your driving lessons. And I like the idea of that you're effectively working on yourself for 9 months or so, and you're able to come back to the people that that are delivering this course and go, this is what I experienced since the last one, and able to sort of kind of work on this, and you're progressing it, and over that 9 months with support from so you've kind of got this coach for 9 months as well, and I imagine you sort of offer that sort of extra support for anyone that's struggling with it all. And that's how, so I find that when I've tried to change things in my lessons in the past, some of it sticks and some of it doesn't, and then you forget it. But I think actually, if you're consistent with it over that 9 months, they become the way you train, and so it just becomes the way you train. So I think I like the idea of that concept of spreading it out. I think that's a much better way of offering a course. Not that there's anything wrong with like a quick workshop, particularly if you've got a standard.
Yeah. I mean, if I can just pick up on that before you move on, Phil, a couple of things. Something that that we get from Try Coaching, and you can get this from Facebook, certain Facebook groups as well. Not only do you have the support of the organization and the trainer, but we want to create spaces, funnily enough, away from Facebook. So the software, the platform that we'll be using, we have the ability to create kind of little groups of the cohorts. I mean, that's what they are. So there'll be a space online separate from Facebook that will just be the people that you were on the qualification with. So we can do things like this online, just with our group who are on that course, and people can bounce ideas off each other. And there was something else that you mentioned I was going to pick up on. Yeah. So the one-to-one coaching, something that Bright Coaching will do as an additional product, is one-to-one coaching for people who are looking to develop. So personal coaching, personal development, business coaching. That's something that we will be launching next year as well. And I think there's an appetite for it. And I think there's it will help many people get to where they want to be. I heard I feel like I quote Chris Benstead all the time. I don't want to feel like I'm ripping him off and stealing all his ideas. But I once heard Chris Benstead talk about the fact that he would like to create some kind of career pathway for driving instructors. And I love that idea. I love that idea that you get your qualification, and then there's this kind of pathway for instructors that they go, right, okay, what's next? Yeah. Brilliant. That's my CPD for that year. Okay, what's next year? What's next? I really like that. And I think something like business coaching or personal development coaching, whatever you want to call it, is a really good way of doing that.
Yep. It should almost be, obviously that pathway could be so like branch off in however many ways you want.
Yeah.
But just having the concept of that's the norm would be good, so that it is just the norm to do that and to think what's next, how can I improve myself. So yeah, no, I love that, and I'm really intrigued about the course and looking forward to seeing how it progresses and goes. And you might be seeing me doing a little trip up to Glasgow to come see you.
That's great. I just want to add one. Sorry, Phil, I know this is your podcast and not mine, but the one thing that I've not mentioned about the qualification that was really important to me to get in there is the stuff around driver psychology and how the human body works and how our brains work. Because I think that this is as important or more important, depending on the mood I'm in, will depend how I describe this. I think that knowing how people work is as important as knowing how a car works for a driving instructor. And years ago, people used to, when coaching first came into our industry, people used to kind of sneer at it a little bit, and there was all this kind of drama about coaching versus instruction. I would hear people say, but hang on a minute, we're not psychologists. And I kind of take issue with that, because I think we are psychologists. We're just not trained very well to do it. And there's really important stuff around why people commit faults and why people are involved in accidents that driving instructors should know. The way that the DVSA works at the moment and the way that driving instructors are trained is that you give people the knowledge, you check that they have the understanding, and you check that they understand the consequences. But far too often that's not enough. There are loads of occasions where people have the knowledge, they know what the consequences are, but they'll still go and do the wrong thing. They'll either choose to do the wrong thing, or they will have some kind of slip or error in judgment, and they'll make a mistake anyway. So it was really important for me to get this stuff that I've learned through CPD in the industry and research that I've read, to get that into a qualification, because that's a huge gap that's not been covered in our CPD offerings at the moment.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that a lot of PDIs are not given this sort of information. I've actually just recently come off a Zoom call with a PDI who wasn't even given anything close to this sort of kind of stuff. It wasn't even the basic sort of kind of coaching stuff. And so, yeah, that's maybe something that we need to address within the industry is how PDIs are trained, which then leads to how learners are trained, and therefore then onto how road safety will improve. It starts at that top point. So is this, obviously this course is aimed at something, an ADI potentially wanting to progress. Would you recommend it, or would you maybe see how it could be tweaked for just, this is how we train PDIs from the start?
Yeah, so one of the main markets for me in Bright Coaching is driving instructor trainers, people like you. It has to be one of the main markets, because if it's to do what I want it to do, separately from being a commercial success, obviously, I want this to change the way that ultimately I want this to change the way that driving lessons are delivered, which means changing the way that driving instructors deliver driving lessons, which means changing the way driving instructors are trained. You mentioned something a couple of minutes ago about the norm. I can't remember what you were talking about, but it just made me think about the culture that we have in our industry. I think it was CPD you were talking about. So the culture of, people qualify, get the green badge, and then going on to do CPD is a normal thing to do. I think we can do that with driving lessons, because we saw it happen. We've seen it happen already. We never used to ask people what they want to do in driving lessons. Now we do all the time. These things are habits. These things are introduced. They take a while to bed in, but gradually what happens is people realize the benefit. And if they do it often enough, they get the feedback that they're looking for from learner drivers, and they realize that it's a good thing to do, and they keep doing it. And because they keep doing it, guess what? They get better at it. It's mind blowing, isn't it? How that works. Get the reps in. So yeah, I want to change the way that driving lessons are delivered for the benefit of road safety. I want to change the way that driving instructors are trained, and that obviously starts with you guys. I actually think there's value here to fleet as well. And this is probably where I'm at the moment with the qualification. The qualification is happening. We're selling it from, I'm not sure when this is going out. It's going on sale from the 30th of October. But I am still working actively with SQA to tweak the assignments and the assessments. And I'm really struggling with SQA because over this particular bit, because they don't have an understanding of the fact that we're not all driving instructors. So they don't understand the things like a fleet trainer. How do we challenge a fleet trainer to change his attitudes or improve his knowledge and skills in a particular area? And then how do we assess a fleet trainer on this who maybe doesn't have any learner drivers? So that's kind of one of the final strands that I'm working on with the qualification just now. What I thought you were going to ask me was, is this suitable for PDIs? And I would say no. By all means, if you're a PDI listening to this, stick it in your diary for after you've qualified. But this is not something that you want to do, because I would worry it would distract you from your Part 3 test. So stick with your trainer, assuming it's a good trainer, for your Part 3 test. And then this would be one of your CPD options for further down the line.
Yeah. And I agree that potentially there's almost like it could be too much information to start with. You need those basics first, but then I'm taking my experience here from doing the BTEC, that I certainly put elements of that into my training when I was training PDIs, and that filters through. So I think that's the right approach, is get the trainers in, and that it will trickle down through the industry. It's just getting all the trainers in, because my concern would be is that the trainers you get are probably doing a half decent job already.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah. I mean, I know they are. But I've already got a couple coming from England to Glasgow, so that's really reassuring. I have to say the feedback that I've received from guys in the industry, guys that I respect, has really encouraged me to battle on and get through it. And it's kind of I feel kind of validated that the idea is going to work, and it will be successful. So I appreciate it.
So let's move on to your work with The Honest Truth, which I didn't even know you were doing some work with The Honest Truth until Terry actually mentioned it on a conversation the other night. And I deliberately said to him, don't tell me what it is. I want to hear I want to hear Stewart's explanation. So talk to me about
that. So this is in line with the module on behavioural change that we have with the PDA level 7. And I was just sitting one night and I was watching the webinar. I don't know if it was the launch webinar or not, but it was one of Ollie's webinars, and Liz Box was on it. And I know Liz, I've spoken to Liz. I've spoken to Liz on a couple of occasions about my qualification to ask for her input and help, especially at the start. And she was very, very helpful. And it occurred to me that the Honest Truth was more aligned with what I was trying to do than I originally realised. The Honest Truth was not something I knew a lot about. I had signed up to it years ago and I'd never implemented it into my training, as I'm sure happens to many instructors. Actually, you get all the materials and all that kind of stuff, and you put them in the boot, and you kind of forget about them because we're all busy.
I was the same. I struggled to implement it. However, with the app, I've found it a lot easier.
And the app's a game changer, which is what I realised as I was watching this. And I've got to be honest, Phil, I'd love to say it was all planned out and there was all a grand strategy behind it, but I just had a bit of a gut instinct, and I thought, I think this would be a win-win situation for what Ollie's trying to do. And obviously it's going to be a win for Bright Coaching because it will improve my product. And I had the module on behavioural change written. I designed my own kind of behavioural change techniques that would form the assignments. But obviously they were not academically researched behavioural change techniques. They were copied from other things that I'd read or seen. And there was no videos or anything like that. I didn't have an app or anything. So I did a very old-fashioned thing. This is actually the week before the expo, and I knew that Ollie was going to be there. And I thought to myself, I really can't be that guy who goes up and collars a former copper and says, listen to me, here's my elevator pitch. I want you to work with me. So I did a very old-fashioned thing, and I got my friend Sue Duncan, who's the secretary at the NGC. She's a legend. I asked Sue to introduce me. How old-fashioned is that? And Sue did, obviously, and Ollie being Ollie, this was over email, and Ollie said, yeah, let's get a call. You free tomorrow? Got the Zoom call with Ollie. 2 hours later on a Zoom call, I basically pitched my qualification, pitched what I was trying to do, and he said, love it. And he just was all in. I had a breakfast meeting with him on the morning of the expo. So I had to get up even earlier than the rest of you. And go through a few more details, and we've been thrashing it out since. And basically what's happened is I've rewritten the model on behavioural change to put the honest truth at the centre of it. We obviously need to, there's a little bit more to it than just, here's the honest truth, go and deliver it. Because if you want that, you just subscribe to the honest truth. What we do on the qualification is discuss the whole area of behavioural change around healthcare, around the criminal justice system, because the stuff that they're talking about in road safety through REC reports and all that kind of stuff. Fiona, I'm sorry, I can't remember Fiona's name. Is it Fiona Fife? And Mark Sulman were heavily involved with the REC in focusing on behavioural change. And what they're finding is that the stuff that works in healthcare settings can also apply in road safety, or it should also apply in road safety, because it's all human beings. It's all the brain. It's all getting messaging across and encouraging people to form habits. So there are some incredibly useful parallels that we can use in our industry, and that's what we're trying to do. And then what we're doing is we're encouraging them to use the honest truth. So now you know the Now you know the science behind it. Now you know the research behind it. Now you know the academic argument. Here's a tool that you can go and use, implement into your driving lessons, make a difference. And now you know, and this is something I spoke about with Ollie. This is not to disrespect the honest truth in any way. Obviously, I love the honest truth because I wouldn't have approached them. But there is an element of, I think there is an element of people signing up for the honest truth. Not, I hope I don't get shot down in flames for this, not solely for the road safety benefit, but because it's a business benefit. It's added value for their learner drivers that will enable them to stick their prices up a little bit. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm a businessman. I understand added value. But I think that the honest truth will get more purchase in terms of its messaging if driving instructors understand the background behind behavioural change, which is why the honest truth exists. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I'm intrigued by this. That it's a business concept, because I think you can do both. Absolutely, like we signed up to it because it is a good tool, but also signed up to it because it's a great way of saying, hey, look, we're going to try and keep your kids alive, not just pass a driving test. And so it can be both. But I also agree, and maybe this is something that obviously going through your courses is a way forward with that, but also something the honest truth maybe need to, and I think they do it with Zooms and stuff, but maybe they need to get a trainer on there who can help ADIs come up with those sort of kind of conversations that they have, because it's something I did with my guys. When we said we were going to implement it, it wasn't just like, here, go show them the videos. It was like, these are the conversations that they should then lead on to. These are the questions you should be asking to sort of aid those videos, because watch a video, turn it off isn't gonna change behavior. And so having those conversations, so maybe that is something that obviously going off to your course would be one way, but maybe it's something the honest truth could also implement, is some suggestions on how to implement it. But I know Ollie, from speaking to him, that he wanted to be as least intrusive as possible into a lesson, so he didn't want to necessarily go, this is what you should, like, telling instructors how to do their job, but maybe there is an element of, here's a new tool, here's a manual sort of.
I think that's bang on. I think it's understanding the difference between CPD, training and development, on the ADI side, which we all need, and then the tools like the honest truth. The honest truth is a tool. It's an excellent tool, and that's the kind of we're not quite meshing yet, I guess, is the way to think about it, and we need to kind of marry those up a little bit.
Yeah. So let's move on to our section about the competencies. And so today's competency, we're going to talk about the number 2, which is, was the agreed lesson structure appropriate for the pupil's experience and ability? So do you want to just talk to me about what that means to you, Stewart?
Yeah, sure. So it sounds, these all sound very easy when you just read them like that, don't they? Yeah. So I'm just going to read a little bit out, because I know this is a podcast and people will be driving maybe as they're listening to it. So the lesson structure should allow the pupil to progress at a manageable rate, stretching them without overwhelming them. So the way to think about this.
Sorry, Stuart, can I just jump in a second there? Because obviously you've read that from the ADI one, and I just want to actually make it clear to everyone about that obviously all these competencies come from the ADI one, and there is a section in there that basically describes what the DVSA are looking for. So obviously come listen to us talk about it, but if you want that, if you're more of a visual reading sort of learner, then head over and find the ADI one.
Bang on, good point. The ADI one is the guidance for driving examiners that and how to assess you on your standards check and Part 3 tests. It's like a cheat sheet, isn't it? It's like a cheat sheet for your tests. So get yourself familiar with it. every course that you go on, every workshop that you go on, or every video course that covers the competencies is taken from this. So this is the source, isn't it? Yeah. So lesson structure should allow the pupil to progress at a manageable rate, stretching them without overwhelming them. So too often we see assessments with PDIs, sometimes Part 3 tests, sometimes standard checks, excuse me, where the instructor plays it safe. So the instructor has it's a side effect of you planning ahead for your standards check or your Part 3, and spending a week thinking about your route, thinking about your pupil, obviously, and who you're going to take, and then picking a pupil, thinking about what subject you're going to teach or what topic, and then thinking about your route. And the mindset around what you want your pupil to do is a bit of a challenge for instructors, because if people were honest, what they want their pupil to do is not to make any mistakes that catch them out. And I find myself quite often trying to correct that mindset or challenge that mindset, around actually your pupil's making mistakes is a positive thing, as long as you control it and keep it safe. Obviously, that's your job as well. But the mistakes are what will help you pass your Part 3 test or your standard check. That's your opportunity to show to the examiner that you know how to do it. If you are taking your pupil around a series of roundabouts, medium-sized roundabouts, and you've been doing that for the past fortnight, and they're comfortable with it now, and there are very few mistakes, very few errors on that, that will show up to the examiners. The examiners are very experienced drivers. They know when a learner driver is in their comfort zone and out of their comfort zone, as do you. You're not fooling anyone as a driver instructor when you're keeping someone. In coaching, we refer to this as comfort zones and stretch zones, which I kind of like. I like the idea of a stretch zone because it's flexible. You can let it go, you can pull it back again. I really like that. And I use that in my training quite often. So you need to build in a stretch zone for your pupils. Whatever that topic is, or whatever that practice area is, you should have somewhere in your lesson that you're able to stretch that in some way. On the flip side of that, overwhelm. And this happens, I try not to talk too much about test here. I will try and talk about lessons where I can. But it always presents as more of an issue on a standard check or a Part 3. But what happens is you go and pick up your pupil who's a reasonable driver. Everything's been going really well, really good progress in terms of their confidence and getting through the syllabus, etc. And then all of a sudden things go back the way. And that catches instructors out, but it shouldn't. Always more likely to happen on a standard check or a Part 3 because it's a different scenario, it's a different setting. All of a sudden there's a strange man or woman sitting in the back who they don't know. In some occasions they might know that you are being tested, which actually puts additional pressure on them because most of them want you to do well, believe it or not. They want to drive well to show that you're a good instructor. That's what we see when we're sitting in the back. So even though we say to them, he's watching me, he's watching you, that's only going to do so much good. And then what happens is the learner does not drive to the normal standards and it collapses. So that shouldn't catch you out as a PDI or an ADI. You must be able to deal with that and have a strategy to cope with that.
What I would say about sitting in the back, because you're right, that's a massive issue that can come up with certainly learners suddenly having this person in the back is one of my solutions to that is get your trainer in the back of the car with the person you're taking them to the Part 3. So it's still going to be a little bit different on the Part 3, but it allows them to get used to being watched, having someone sat in the back, and just getting used to that sort of environment, as well as having the added benefit of your trainer being able to help you see what your learners' needs are. So that's a great solution to that.
Really good idea. I also, I'm not very good at this, but I would like to get to the stage where the trainer is also able to help the learner as well. Too often we kick the learner out the car and then we give the instructor the feedback. But why should the learner not benefit from the trainer's experience as well in certain situations?
I quite often do my feedback with the pupil in the car and
Yeah,
get them involved. I get the pupil to give the feedback as well, because I think that's crucial. So I'll ask the pupil, like, how did you find that lesson? What could they have done differently? And so that can be good. It's obviously with the trainers, the PDI or ADI's permission, because it can be a bit awkward, and maybe I'll save a few things for after. What the ones that I tend to hold back on is maybe something where there was maybe something technical wrong. Because I just don't want the ADI and PDI to feel bad that it was wrong, and so I'll have a conversation about that, and then they can go tell their learner next week that, oh, by the way,
yeah,
that thing I said was incorrect. Unless it's glaringly obvious and I think it's going to have an effect on the lesson, in which case I'll probably jump in the moment, because I'm like, nope, don't let them do that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. The reason it just flagged up to me is something. It's not something I normally do, I have to admit. But last Friday, I was on a part 3 test, and when the examiner got out, and I sat in, and it was the first part 3 test I'd sat in on since 2019. So it was really good to get back doing that, actually, just for various reasons. And I found myself, the PDI asked me, so what do you think? And I found myself just automatically getting into that conversation. The pupil was there and I involved her, and I really enjoyed it. It worked well for the PDI as well. So teaching the pupil who turns up on the day, I guess, is the second concept. So the first one is about comfort zone and stretch zone. The second one is about managing the pupil who turns up on the day and being aware that learning is not linear, I guess. Let me just check my camera because I always get this wrong. So quite often people think that learning goes in this direction up in a straight line. Did that work? It might work in the playback. It might be reversed. So just in case that didn't work, learning goes that way in reverse. We'll give Phil a lot of editing to do.
I'm just going to leave both in, because then people
okay.
It
doesn't matter what I do then.
Yeah.
But we know, but we need to appreciate, and we know this. This is the annoying thing. We kind of know this. We just don't apply it. That learning actually goes up, and then we reach. And if for the people who run, they call it hitting the wall. You go down, and our job as trainers is to pick up the support, or change the lesson, or change the difficulty, and get it going back up again so that it exceeds the point at which it dropped. And all too often, we're not very good at reacting to that drop. I've trained instructors who really struggle with this concept. That whole idea that, but they know this. I told them this. They've been doing it fine for 3 weeks, and all of a sudden they're not doing it. So getting that kind of approach in your head that people are always likely to have a dip, and people have dips for the same reasons that they have accidents. They have off days. They didn't sleep well last night. They've had an argument with someone. They're stressed out. They've not had enough to eat. All these different elements have an impact on your body, an impact on your brain, and things happen. Things happen.
So just one thing I wanted to add in here is, and actually you mentioned Jen and Claire's book In the Driving Seat, and this is a little diagram that I liked, and obviously it's going to be hard on the podcast to do the diagram, but they basically
we'll just tell them we'll just tell them it was excellent, Phil. We'll tell them it's excellent. Cool.
Yeah, yeah, it was really good. So on the bottom they had challenge, and then on the way up it was support, and then they have 4 boxes in the middle, and for me this competency is all about that, where you are tweaking the level of challenge for the pupil, or tweaking the level of support for the pupil to get that sweet spot of learning. So if it's too much support, and obviously that then links to other competencies, But if there's too much support and you're helping too much, then it's not pitched at the right level for the pupil. If it's too easy, like you said earlier, not pitched at the right level. And I think tweaking those two dials is a way of making sure you've got that pitch right. So what I wanted to ask you actually then, so if we're talking about pitching this lesson at the right level for a pupil, obviously we can change our level of instruction and change the challenge. But what if you had a situation for, let's say, for example, you've got a pupil, you've been doing roundabouts and it's going well. And I think this is something that I think it barely ever happens because of, like you said, the pupils tend to like regress on a part 3. But let's say we're doing roundabouts, we've got 5-10 minutes left and it's going well. And I think that freaks people out because they talk about, well, should I go and do a maneuver or whatever? What would you do in that scenario to tweak that level so that we're still pitching it at the right level for the pupil?
Yeah, it's so annoying. It's so annoying. Yeah, so this is the downside to the fact that the tests are only 45 minutes now, because when it was an hour, it was always really used to work really, really well. That you would have that plan B up your sleeve to go and recap a maneuver or something like that. It was good. Yeah, so if your pupil is driving well, and you're not sure what to do for the last 10 minutes, I mean, I kind of, there's a part of me that wants to say you've maybe not done enough on your part 3 test, because either you've missed things, you've not analysed. It's very, very unusual for a learner driver who's not at test stand to drive very well for 30 minutes, 35 minutes, without something to talk about, without something to analyse, without something to elicit feedback on, and get some thoughts on and have a conversation around. That's very unusual. So my first instinct there is that something's probably been missed. The second thing is, has the lesson been too easy? There's maybe not been enough stretch built in to that. And it doesn't need to be built into the lesson, but it's the stretch that you need to have up your sleeve as the plan B. Instead of recapping a maneuver, you've got to think that way. Because I mean, you would do that. I'm putting words into people's mouths here. We do this every day on our driving lessons, though, do we not? We know when someone's ready to have a conversation about making things more difficult. The challenge is on a part 3, you might not have time to go to a different area to do it. I don't know. It's a tricky one, Phil. It's a tricky one. I think when it does happen, unfortunately, my instinct is that something's been missed. Sorry?
But you've already screwed it up by
that sounds really harsh. Sounds really harsh. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think you actually you nailed it on the head. I think with the fact that it's the 45 minutes, and also that the nature of the test means you might not be able to go and find that more challenging roundabout or something, because you haven't got the time to go there, whereas you would do on either a normal lesson or a normal course of lessons. You'd say that you'd get to a point and go, okay, next week we're going to go do this, and you can't do that in that last 10 minutes. So for me, I think the probably two things I would do is either, and you may have already done this, confirm understanding and knowledge of what's happened. So get the pupil to go do it and talk you through it, and check that they're understanding, because that's a nice way of sort of finalizing that sort of kind of lesson and showing that the pupil was understanding. I always tend to send my PDIs out with these ideas just in case, and it's like a break in case of emergencies sort of kind of moment, which I have seen them use this way too early. So questions that make it more challenging in the thought process rather than the challenge of the physical driving. So the roundabouts can be the same, but we're thinking about different stuff. So for example, how would this be different at night? How would this be different in the rain? How would this be different if you had your mates in the car? So it's actually linking back to kind of what you're talking about in your course, getting them to think about those higher levels. And I think that's always a good go-to way of making a lesson more challenging for a pupil without the ability of being able to actually make the roads more challenging. And how would you make this decisions differently in certain scenarios? I think that can be a good go-to way, but I'm always cautious of, and I've seen this when I sat in the back of a part 3 once. I'd given him some questions that might be appropriate if it's going well and if you're struggling. And he was doing, I think, his second loop around town, and he chucked it in, and I was like, "Whoa, not yet, not yet," because it was just, at that point we were still trying to spot hazards, and he started chucking in this deep thinking question and just threw the pupil off. And this is again where this competency for me comes in, is pitching it at the right level. So asking that pupil that question gets you marked down on this one, because it wasn't the right level for the pupil. The pupil was still struggling to spot people walking out and stuff. So don't start asking them. Like, I think we were driving past a pub, and he asked a question about, like, how would this be different on a Saturday night? And it's a great question. It's a great thing to start talking about and discover, but not right now. And I think that's the key here, is that it's pitching it at that level for the pupil, and constantly. I quite often talk about tweaking the dial of the lesson. It almost feels like a driving lesson feels to me a little bit like you're tuning in an old radio, and you're trying to get the sound right, and every time you get it right, the wind changes or something, and you have to tweak it again to get the sound right. And that's what a driving lesson feels to me, is like, you get the sound right and you're going, yeah, this is going well, this is really good, and then something happens that we need to either up our level of support, or the pupil's doing really well, so we need to lower our level of support. And that's, for me, that you're constantly tweaking the dials to get that, we're in that zone, we're learning and we're doing well.
I really like that, Phil. I think you're onto something there, in terms of what we do when a topic has been mastered. And that's the time when we should be thinking about the higher levels on the GTE. Useful for a part 3 test as well. As you were talking about that there, I was also thinking about a part 3 training session that I did a few weeks ago, and I was role playing and I was the learner. And I go to the big roundabout that I normally use. We were doing straight aheads. Well, the plan was to do right-hand turns, actually, because the pupil had been doing left and straight aheads the week before. And as we got to the roundabout, it was an absolute shambles, because one of the lanes on the roundabout had been closed for roadworks, and it turned into a really dreadful lesson for the learner. Obviously, it would have been a bit tricky, but for the PDI, it was really useful, because we got to park up at the side of the road. And the PDI kind of panicked a little bit, because he was saying, so what happens? What if that happens on my part 3 test? So that obviously opens up a huge discussion about route planning, but it also opened up a different discussion about the kind of things you're talking about, using the what if scenarios and, out of the box unusual situations. Because do we teach learner drivers how to deal with a roundabout where the road on the left is closed and all the traffic is backed up in a big queue in front of you, and you have to change lane? So you're in the left-hand lane going straight ahead, but there's a car parked in front of you. Do we teach people how to kind of navigate safely, looking over their shoulder? Is it safe to go? There's still traffic bombing at you from the right. All this kind of difficult stuff. So yeah, there is always something else to teach. Even if it's not, worst case scenario, to go back to your original question, last 10 minutes, nothing else happening. Just have a look around you. Just have a look around you for the transit van that's parked on the double yellows or the zebra crossing. Just have a look around you for the bin lorry that's causing the meeting situation on the high street, for example, and bring these things into play, setting up the next lesson, for example, or referring back to something that's been learned previously. Opportunities and examples to reinforce learning is further down in the marking sheet. But if the lesson's going well and you've not missed anything, and you've done everything you should be doing, then just be creative. Just teach them something. One of the best pieces of advice an examiner ever gave a PDI of mine, it was his final attempt, and the examiner came out and took a deep breath because he remembered the previous part 3, and he just looked at me and said, "Now remember, teach them something, teach them anything." And that just always stuck with me, that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. PDIs and ADIs get hung up with, they have to achieve the goal, but that's not true at all.
No,
that's not true.
Yeah, learning needs to take place,
Yeah,
and it doesn't have to be the original planned learning.
exactly.
So brilliant. Anything else you want to add on that? I feel like we've covered it off, but if there's anything else you want to...
One small thing, Phil, as I was reading this over, obviously I've read this inside out, but as I was rereading it this morning, it occurred to me that the language is very client-centered, more client-centered than I gave it credit for. Ensuring the pupil understands what they plan to do and agrees with that plan. Very different from the instructor telling the pupil what his plan is for today.
Yep.
Today I thought we'd do roundabouts and we turn left and right, and then going straight into remind me of your approach system, etc., etc. This is a coaching and client-centered bullet point that we have on the ADI one. Ensure that the pupil understands what they plan to do, and get agreement on that. There was one other thing: building in opportunities to check the statements made by the pupil before moving to more challenging situations. That's an eliciting feedback. The way I read that, that's a feedback conversation that is had before we move in to that stretch zone. Go back to the example you gave earlier on, where the PDI started moving on to more complex kind of Q&A. Let's not transfer responsibility too quickly. Again, a lot of instructors go into this with the idea, it's that line, that diagonal line of learning. I have to transfer responsibility. I have to stop talking, and I have to get the pupil independent. But you shouldn't do that. In my view, I'd be interested in your views on this. I don't believe that you should do that without having a conversation and getting agreement on that. When I was trained to become an instructor, it was almost like you're talking the pupil through something, and then gradually you kind of get back in your seat and you stop talking. It's as if you're trying to make yourself disappear and the pupil's driving like you're not there. And I can see the argument that there's maybe value in that, but not from a proper educational coaching perspective. It should be agreed. You've got to clarify the support. You've got to agree that we can change all this if we need to. So that was my only other thing. I think that there is, even though this is not the unit that everyone quotes about coaching, and that the language is very much coaching and client-centered around these competencies.
Yeah, I think it is all the way through the ADI one, really, isn't it? Sort of very much focused on the client-centered and the way they approached it. I 100% agree that we need to be checking with the pupil before we move on and push that on, whether that is a verbal check or sometimes. And I remember a situation a few months ago now. I was teaching a pupil, and we were doing roundabouts actually, and we were doing nice easy roundabouts, and in my head it was time to move on to the big roundabouts because they were doing really well. And I said that to them, like, is it like, how do you feel like we're getting on? Do you feel like it's time to move on? And she was like, nope, definitely not.
Yeah.
And so that was important that I had that conversation with her rather than just moved it on. And so we were coming up to a roundabout, and it was time to either go right and carry on round, do the loop we've been doing, or left to go to the big boy roundabouts. And it was important because it allowed me to kind of see that there was a difference between what I was perceiving, which was, this is going well, she's making great decisions and approaching really well, and what was going on in her head, which was roundabouts. And so it allowed me to then put in this situation, and this is again maybe that bit at the end of a part 3, allowed me to sort of challenge her effectively. I challenged her to do the next few roundabouts independently, and I asked her to notice her feelings during these roundabouts and the decisions she was making, and they all went really well, like they had been doing already, but it just made her a little bit more aware of that. So then when we got to the same point, and I said, do you want to go and have a little look at the slightly bigger roundabouts, she was like, yeah, I feel like I've got it now. And it's that sort of kind of thing. It's like building in that opportunity for the pupil to confirm with themselves or with you or whatever that they can do it, and that allows them to have the confidence, I think, as well, to sort of kind of move on and progress.
Yeah. And it's such a fundamental thing, isn't it? This goes into feedback, and praise and all this kind of stuff, and the instructor leading the conversation, that your opinion does not matter. For the most part, your opinion does not matter about how well your pupil is doing. What matters is how they feel they're doing. And if you don't ask, you can't find this stuff out. You've got to ask these questions and encourage people to be honest with you and open up. Because if you don't have the correct kind of balance in the relationship, your pupils are going to tell you what they think you want to hear, because they don't want to look stupid. If you portray that you think they should be moving on and making progress, they don't want to argue with you. They'll say, "Oh, okay, then let's go and do the big boy roundabouts." Okay, yeah, if that's what, because they'll assume that's what my mates did. This is the way you have to ask, you have to listen, you have to watch body language as well. Yeah, really important.
Yeah. And I think in a way it's probably testament to the rapport that I have with that pupil that she was able to say no.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, that you have that rapport with a pupil, that they can be open and honest with you. So yeah, as long as you've got nothing else to add to that, we will move on. And we're going to start to talk about the national standards for driver and rider training. So this document, I hear a lot of trainers on podcasts or webinars and stuff talk about this document. And I think it's a document that not many ADIs have read. And to a certain extent, I don't blame them, because it's not the most exciting document. I do think it's something we should know as a trainer, and certainly as an ADI or a trainer. But I can also understand why people don't gravitate towards it, because it's not exciting. So, and I remember Bob talking about a story how he asked in a room full of trainers how many had read it, and it was like 10%. So, yeah, which is particularly for a room full of trainers, I think it's important that definitely trainers should sort of kind of know this document. So my goal here then, having these conversations on the podcast, is to try and make it a little bit more exciting and let us do the reading and then tell you guys what's on it, and maybe hopefully inspire you to go and have a look at it yourself. So yeah, Role 6, Unit 1 of the National Standards Driver Training is prepare to train learner drivers and meet all the legal requirements. So Stuart, do you want to just talk to me about like some highlights from there for you?
I'll do my best to make it sound exciting, Phil. Yeah. So the first thing that flags up to me is actually through my work with the ADI NGC. I don't think we mentioned this at the start. One of my other roles, I'm the head of engagement at the ADI NGC, and we deal on a fairly regular basis with instructors who have, for one reason or another, fallen foul of the DVSA. Some of that's to do with behavioural issues, which we won't talk about. But some of this is to do with just a misunderstanding or a lack of knowledge around this particular unit. In particular, under performance standards, I should clarify, this is Unit 6.1.1, confirm that you comply with legal requirements. And number 3 in performance standards is that we should comply with organisational and legal requirements to report any change to your status as an instructor, such as convictions, medical conditions, changes to your eyesight. There's 2 things there in particular that are important. Eyesight. I think, actually, maybe not PDIs. Maybe we don't. PDIs are not as aware of this. Maybe this is something you kind of learn on the job at the moment, unfortunately. We check our learner's eyesight on lesson number 1. But quite often you can be training that learner driver for a year before you take them to test, especially with test times at the moment. So you should be checking your learner driver's eyesight closer to test date, so that if they do need to go and get checked and get glasses or a change in prescription, that they have time to do it before the test. But you need to be on top of that as well. If you've not had your eyes tested in a year or two, then it could be the case that you no longer are able to read a license plate from the prescribed distance. So I was going to say keep an eye on that, but that would have been a terrible pun for your podcast, so I'm not going to say that. Please pay attention to that. Medical conditions, I'm trying to think. I have a feeling that there are medical conditions that instructors have approached the ADINJC about, and there is always specific guidance about these kind of things. So somebody coming back from having a stroke, for example, a TIA, you may need to be signed off by your GP, for example. If there are heart issues, if you've a heart issue or like a minor heart attack or something like that, which is more common than we like to think, you will have to go and complete, this is in Scotland anyway, you go and complete like a cardio rehabilitation kind of thing, and then you'll be fine. Your license will be fine. On the flip side of this, so that's performance standards, your physical ability to be a driving instructor. But there are more.
So before you move on there, can I just jump in with those medical conditions? Because I think it's like you can sort of kind of hear you saying there that you're trying to remember it, and it's not off the like tip of your tongue, because it's the sort of thing that you would go and research it if it happens. And I think probably what we need to get across here that is you don't need to know exactly all the lists of everything that you need to tell the DVSA about. What you need to know is that if you have something happen, a medical incident or conviction or something similar to that, that's when you need to go and actually think. You just need to be aware that you might need to tell the DVSA, and therefore, or the DVLA actually as well, for your license of being able to drive, and they're probably two are probably quite a similar list. Just be aware that there may be, and then go find it out. Go and speak to the ADINJC or research it yourself. I think that's probably the key for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, don't ignore it. Don't ignore it, and don't assume that everything will be okay, because it's your job, it's your livelihood. Make sure you're on top of it. And then on the other side of from performance standards, we have knowledge and understanding, and this is the one at the NGC actually that we see more. And there's a line here that refers. Sorry, I'm just reading something else. No, yeah. A line here that states you must know and understand the types of offence you must report under organisational or legal requirements and how they affect your status as an instructor. And the one that we hear more often than we should, for a couple of different reasons, is when driving instructors get points on their license, and it does happen quite often. So I'm not passing judgment on that aspect of it at all, but if you don't tell the DVSA that you have picked up a couple of penalty points on your driving license, and then subsequently you end up maybe at 6 points, they will take a very, very strong view on that. And the decision on how they deal with that will be weighted by your honesty. Have you told the DVSA that something has happened? And are you going to do something about it? And we had somebody lose their green badge earlier in the year. It may have been two people. At least one person has lost their badge because of penalty points, and they did not tell the DVSA. Because very few driving instructors are going to be get 6 points automatically. But if you get 3 points, you've got to tell the DVSA. And they will mark that, and they'll give you advice and guidance and all that kind of stuff. So it's that, don't ignore it. It's the medical stuff. Don't ignore it. Be honest, be upfront. And then is there anything else on that side? Whether there are requirements to belong to a register of instructors for the training vehicle you're using. That's not my specialist area. I don't deal with LGVs or trailers or anything like that. So unless you've got anything to add to that side.
Oh, I don't do LGVs. I had my first go in a LGV vehicle at the expo. That was
brilliant.
I was number 2 in the queue.
That was brilliant. I would have loved to have done that, but I was far too busy working, Phil. Stuff down below is about the vehicle. So 6.1.2. 6.1.1 is you, 6.1.2 is the vehicle. And I guess insurance is the big one on this, Phil. We kind of briefly mentioned that before. It may be the case that if your car breaks down and you have a test the next day and you want to borrow a colleague's car, it may be the case that you're not allowed to drive that car. Don't assume that you're allowed to take someone to test in someone else's car. Get the policyholder to check that policy, because they are different. Especially in the current environment, there's a cost of living crisis going on. And I know I find myself doing this with my house insurance, for example. Quite often the insurers will add things on and you will take things off. And that can happen with car insurance as well. It's not, I mean, Phil and I will be the first to admit that it's not our specialist area, but the message here is just to check that. And that's what the driver and rider training standards are saying. You don't need to know the inside of every insurance policy that is offered to driving instructors. You need to know that you need to assume that you need to check. Assume that you need to check these things.
Definitely. And I think actually, so something you said there was about whether you're able to drive the car. And I think probably the more important thing to check actually is that you're able to teach in that car.
Yeah.
Because you will probably be able to drive the car, because most driving instructor insurances allow anybody over the age over 25 to drive. And again, I say most because do check. But it's the fact that if you're taking a friend's, like, or even one of your pupils in a different person's car, you're probably charging for that lesson, and so therefore you're delivering a lesson and charging for tuition. So that's a different type of insurance, and that's the bit that for me might not be covered, because actually if it was covered, what's the point of everyone having their own individual insurances if you could just jump into anybody's car and do a lesson? I would say the same as well for things like, and again, I think some insurance companies do cover this for mock tests.
Yeah.
Jumping from car to car. And again, I would double check, because I think different people do different mock tests in different ways. Now, for me, the way I like to do a mock test is that the instructor who I'm doing a mock test for is sat in the back. Now, that can actually change the insurance because they're in the car. Versus where I think some people do like a swap thing where you swap and you get in each other's cars, where now you're both delivering paid lessons in somebody else's car with no instructor. So again, I would check with the both insurance companies whether that works, because you don't want to find out at the wrong time after the incident has happened.
Exactly. Yeah, just assume. Don't assume that everything's okay. I remembered one other, Phil, from the first unit on there. This is going to sound really basic. Confirm that you're registered as an instructor with the appropriate body or bodies, or that you're exempt from registration. So we had a case, I'm sure it was in Scotland, it was in the news anyway, about a driving instructor whose registration, his green badge had expired. And you get, is it 12 months? I think you get 12 months. They'll write to you and tell you that your green badge is expired, and then they'll give you 12 months, six to 12 months to renew your badge. And this particular instructor did not, and he was caught. He was charged by the police, and he was given a hefty fine. He may have been banned from driving or something like that. But there are laws in place that if you're not registered as a driving instructor and you're charging money, you are breaking the law, and the police will charge you as they should.
Yeah, because and it'd be interesting to see why that happened, because whether that's someone who, I don't know, didn't want to pay the license, or whether it's just poor admin.
But I like to think of it as poor admin, because I'm terrible at admin, and my green badge expired once, just because life got in the way and we were moving house at the time. And I think because my job is not teaching learners primarily anymore, if I was teaching learners all the time, I would have my green badge up. But my green badge has fallen off and it's in the pocket of the passenger door. And my green badge expired, and I knew there were letters arriving, and I just never opened it. So it's an admin error. But at some point, you've got to take responsibility for your unopened mail.
So anything else from this section? I think that for me, those were the big factors in there.
Yeah, I think that's it, Phil. I think it's the other stuff is basic kind of car stuff. I think the message, if it's me talking to PDIs, the message is it's personal responsibility for your own health and your own licensing, and that kind of thing. Yeah, all good.
Yeah, and I think the car stuff, just to quickly touch on that, is effectively have a legal car, which
Yeah.
I think we've brushed over it because we probably see that as a no-brainer. And I think the only thing maybe from a PDI would be something I'd be aware of is things like your tires, and warning lights, because I suppose we almost get held to quite a slightly higher standard because we're taking people's test, and I don't want to be that instructor that the examiner says no. And so you tend to change your tires when they're getting, you check them just before that point of them being illegal, which you should be doing anyway. But I think you're just more conscious of it as an instructor, because there's nothing worse than turning up to a test and it being turned away and it being your fault.
Yeah, happened to me. It was a brake light for me. I think it was I was on a training license, and I think it was my second or third ever driving test. And the examiners obviously saw me into the test centre car park doing a park, and they must have clocked that my brake light was out. And of course, what's the show me the question? Let's have a look at your brake light. Never been asked about brake lights ever again ever since. And brake lights are not something that you can quickly change, let me tell you.
No.
Depending on your vehicle, these are tricky things to change.
So
Peugeots are
that has reminded me of a story, and it wasn't my pupil. But so the test would go out if he hadn't have noticed it. And so this person had gone out on a test, and it's summer's day, so the windows were down, and some very nice person from the general public pulled up alongside and leant in and went, "Excuse me, mate, your brake light's out," which any other day would have been absolutely really helpful, very helpful. But on that day, the examiner said, "Oh, can we just take the next left?" Pulled over, went and checked it, and then abandoned the test because the brake light was out. So
no.
absolutely, yeah. The worst bit of help that any member of the public's probably ever given to a person on a driving test.
Oh, that's rubbish.
Definitely fell for that. So I've realised I haven't warned you of this, but I'm going to ask you for a top tip for what you would like, not necessarily relating to what we talked about, but just a general top tip for ADIs and PDIs. But before you give me that top tip, do you want to just let everyone know where they can find you, how they can find this wonderful course we talked about, and where they can find you?
Yes, of course. You can find us at brightcoaching.net. The website opens on the 30th of October, so it may be open already, depending when this goes out. There's a contact form on there if you have any questions. There's a sign-up form for our newsletter on there. If you want to be kept informed of new dates and new locations, hopefully going into 2024. There's only one course scheduled at the moment. There hopefully will be another course later on in 2024. You can also get me on Facebook, or you can get me through the ADI I'm quite easy to find now that people are getting to know me, Phil. You can get me at these places.
You also got a Facebook group for PDIs?
I do have a Facebook group for PDIs. It is called Not All Driving Instructors Are Created Equal. And PDIs are more than welcome to join that. It's a very helpful group. We have PDIs from all over the country. We're trying to do something a little bit different in there and not make it about part 3 test. So that's the aim, is to try and get that culture of continual professional development, self-development bedded in at an early stage for PDIs before they're exposed to the more kind of negative stuff that we were talking about in terms of I think we talked about it off air, in terms of test center culture and social media and all the kind of negative stuff that's out there. Just trying to create a different kind of safe space. Not all driving instructors are created equal. PDIs are more than welcome to join us in there. There's no selling. It's not about that. The PDIs recommend their trainers to other people within there. They recommend other products. They recommend podcasts and all that kind of stuff as well. Just a good kind of resource. to have. Yeah.
Brilliant. And then from my point of view, you can find me at cowleysinstructortraining.com, or again, come and find me on Facebook, Cowley's Instructor Training. And the Facebook group that I'm involved in is Lou's PDI group, where we're an admin on that. And again, it's a great community for resources and generally asking questions and making sure you're going to get the right answer. So, Stuart, top tip. What's your top tip for ADIs or PDIs?
My top tip is the day that you pass your Part 3 test, start thinking about what your next goal is in terms of your career. So personal development is different from your business development. Quite often, a lot of people think about it from a business perspective, whether that's leaving a franchise or their next car, because maybe they want to upgrade the car from the one they've been using as a PDI. But start thinking about your personal development from day one of passing that green badge. Because if you get off, it's so easy to fall into bad habits and think that that's fine, I've passed. I don't need to worry about training until my standards check, which could be, at the moment, 10 years away. That's how you will stall, pardon the pun. That's how you will fall into bad habits. Your development will kind of stag. Try not to fall into that trap. Set yourself some goals about what you're going to do next.
Absolutely, 100% agree. And actually, you're right. Don't even make it about the next standards check. Like, just how can I be the best instructor that I can be? And then when that standards check comes, you won't care because you'll have made yourself better. So absolutely. So yeah, thank you very much for joining me. And yeah, we've learned lots today. And please subscribe if you've enjoyed today. We've got plenty more big trainers coming on to carry on talking about the standards check and the Part 3 and the national standards, and also to tell us their stories. So yeah, please click subscribe. Cowley's Instructor Podcast, where the learning never stops.